As a seemingly totally unstoppable and unkillable holy warrior of God, Sternritter M, the miracle Gerard Valkyrie, was perhaps the single strongest enemy we ever saw in Bleach, outside of course of the likes of Aizen and Yhwach. But as the last line of defence for the cornerstone of his All-Father's fledgling New Quincy Empire, Gerard Valkyrie's mission was simple: keep the invaders at bay. And throughout the entirety of his all-star battle royale, he does not die. He simply comes back stronger each time they seemingly finish him off. And really, this was unlike anything we had ever seen in the series beforehand, outside of literally only Aizen himself. No matter the amount of fatal injuries inflicted on Gerard by the captains, sometimes all at the same time, he will without fail revive and resurrect only bigger and stronger than he was before, in his own words claiming that even in death, I will continue to wield my blade for my god. Not only is that Gerard's coolest line by a mile, it also embodies everything that makes this character so scarily overpowered. So in this video, I want to ask the question, how strong was Gerard Valkyrie? Is he the most powerful enemy we ever see in Bleach, outside of course of the major villains? He's certainly up there in the highest echelon, but just how powerful actually is he? Well, let's try and work it out. Before we get started, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, as well, as it does help to support me and the channel, and it hopefully means we'll get more traction on the YouTube algorithm. And if you really like what I do here on the channel and you want to take that support from me another step further, I do have a Patreon. Now, of course, you don't have to support me over there at all, but if you did decide to, you can get videos like this one early, and you can support me for as little as $1 a month. Everybody who is supporting me, who is a patron of the channel, is coming up on screen right now, and as always, I want to say a massive shout out and a huge thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you all so much. So maybe about 2 years ago now, I'm not exactly sure, but I made a couple of videos that I think personally really helped to put my channel on the map, and they were a pretty comprehensive ranking of all of the Sternritter, from who I felt was the weakest up to the strongest. And it was quite a task. It was rather difficult to do, but in the end I was very happy with the list I came up with, and I think the majority of people, whether they agreed completely or not, also felt the same way. And my number one spot for that, the strongest Sternritter, spoilers for that video if you haven't seen it, was Sternritter M, the miracle Gerard Valkyrie. And I stand by that. I think that is still accurate to this day. Now, the criteria for that video was, when I say strongest, I wasn't just going by their shrift, although of course that would play an important part in the ranking, as the shrifts tend to be the defining trait of each Sternritter. And Gerard's shrift is no slouch. The miracle is easily one of the most powerful we have ever seen in the series. However, if we were going on shrift alone, I probably would have given it to Sternritter V, the visionary Gremmy Thamo, who his power to just imagine things into reality is so totally broken that really only the Almighty can stand up to it. Fittingly, I guess. But the miracle is absolutely up there. I would wager within the top 3 shrifts, the other one being Sternritter X, the X-axis Lil Barrow, and funnily enough, those 3 made up the top 3 of my initial ranking. But Gerard Valkyrie is the complete package, whereas Gremmy Thamo has this incredible ability. He never seems to quite use it to its fullest potential, because his personality, his childlike demeanor, but also his lethargic nature really holds him back, much in the same way as Stark felt like he was being held back. Despite having the power, despite being able to walk the walk, Stark really didn't want to be there at all and didn't want to fight, and basically never really gave it his all until it was too late. But unlike characters like that, Gerard Valkyrie is the real deal. Not only does he have an insanely overpowered shrift, he also has the bulk, the physique, the speed, the mind to kind of match all of it. As he says himself, he is the strongest, mightiest, fastest of all the Quincy, the warrior who has been bestowed with everything. Now, it's not out of character for the Sternritter to make outlandish claims about themselves. It happens quite a lot, and even Gremmy himself claims to be the strongest Sternritter. So really, you kind of have to take that at face value. But as this kind of real endgame boss, Gerard Valkyrie really does feel like he could be the final boss of Bleach outside of Yhwach itself. His positioning in the story as the last major hurdle for our heroes doesn't feel like a coincidence in my mind. So if we really start then just by kind of breaking down Gerard's Shrift, as I mentioned, it is essentially their defining trait, so it makes sense to start here. The miracle can be kind of broken down in a number of different ways. It has its kind of grander abilities, and then it can be taken to its most base, simplistic form as well. In its most reductive form, the miracle simply allows Gerard to replace any part of himself that is destroyed with one that is transformed into God size, as he calls it earlier. Basically what that means is it comes back literally bigger and literally stronger than it ever was before. One of the most prime examples we get of this, the most simple example to begin with, is when his right arm is cut off by Kenpachi Zaraki. The arm is cleaved off, no problem whatsoever, but suddenly we witness this gold light coming out of the stump where Gerard's arm was, and he's like, oh, my right arm, and then suddenly it basically just reappears in a flash of light, and he's like, it's grown even stronger. And we can see that the forearm he now has is literally bigger than his existing forearm on his other arm. Not only is it bigger, as you can see in some of the images here, it's now got these strange black veins. It also has these little shields on the knuckles, which is a cute little detail. But literally, it shows you that anything that Gerard loses will come back stronger and bigger than before, seemingly without end. And that is absolutely key. And we see this version of the miracle taken to the extreme. Gerard is sliced in half by Kenpachi's Bankai, which really should kill anybody. And actually, up until this point in the story, really until I would say about the second half of the 1,000-Year Blood War, most Bleach villains could be killed by, shall we say, traditional means. So, if they lose their head, for instance, that's generally going to mean they are probably going to die. Up until this point, really, only Aizen had been shown to be able to continually survive killing blows of this nature. But then, perhaps in accordance with the increased amount of gore on show in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, Kubo starts showing us way more obvious fatal blows. Gerard is literally cut in two on the screen. We see him sliced in half straight down the middle, straight through his head, in a move that should kill really anybody. But of course he transforms again, his body literally pulling itself back together as he reappears, perhaps even double the size he was before, sporting a pretty cool new helmet, but crucially, he has transformed to be even more powerful than he was previously. And this happens again when his head is literally destroyed. His body is frozen and Byakuya blows his head up in a really cool team effort from the captains, and we see that although his entire body, right down to about his shins, ends up crumbling into dust, he reappears no matter what. And it's fascinating because by this point, Gerard has literally become a being of light. But I think that's Kubo's way of showing us that even if his mortal body is destroyed or removed from existence, he will return no matter what, even if it's just as an angelic being of light. And at this point in the story, the fans were growing weary with enemies that just wouldn't die. We were getting a lot of this. It felt like some Sternritter were very difficult to kill. Lil Barrow, who had just had a big fight prior to this, was also virtually impossible to destroy, and fans had kind of had enough of it. But in my opinion, if you kind of lambasted Kubo and the series for this particular element, I think you kind of missed the point. Being that Yhwach is literally not only the end game boss, the final boss of Bleach, but these guys, particularly the Schutzstaffel, but particularly the upper crust of the Schutzstaffel, being obviously Gerard and Lil, are literally supposed to be the best of the best. Like, they are on a totally different level to just about everyone the series has ever seen, in that they are the closest thing to actual apostates of God. They are his holy warriors, literal beings of angelic light, who are supposed to be, effectively, completely and utterly immortal. And I liked that. I thought it was really cool. The Vandenreich has always had this undertone of like a twisted religious zealot thing going on. And it was really cool to see that emphasized and brought further into the light than ever before with characters like Gerard. In fact, there's a particular panel that I think really encompasses how angelic he is supposed to appear when he's sprouted these massive feathery angelic wings and he is sort of flying towards Zaraki. His sword is by his side, there's like a light ring around it, and he just kind of looks like he is literally like some holy knight driving towards his enemy. And I think that's really cool, and I think as justification for a shrift as broken as the miracle, it works really well. Same with the X-axis. But Gerard's The Miracle doesn't stop there. He has more to it as well, where things start getting a little more vague, a little more conceptual. But basically, he claims that his ability, The Miracle, is kind of born from the quote-unquote hopes of the masses. The reason why his body grows and expands upon his death, his defeat, is because the masses are giving him their hope. You know, they hope that he will succeed, and so he does. Their hope also bears shape as the form of his blade Hoffnung, and when Hoffnung takes damage, when it is chipped in battle, that damage is reflected back onto his opponent as a form of the masses' hope turning into despair at the sight of the broken Hoffnung. As Hitsugaya himself says, it's an ability that seems to defy all logic and reason. And really, as I said, it all just combines to make Gerard the ultimate warrior. And I think this idea of Gerard being the ultimate warrior, the strongest of all the Sternritter, is embodied in his appearance as well. There's more to him than just being a Thor lookalike, you know, and his surname being Valkyrie, but he literally takes on the appearance of somebody who has come down perhaps from Valhalla itself to defend his lord and father. And Gerard takes on the appearance of this incredibly muscle-bound, literally like a sort of Nordic Viking warrior or something like that. Someone who wears a shield on one arm, carries a sword in the other, has a flowing cape. More than any of the Quincy, who seem to embody, as we've mentioned before on the channel, new age technology or modernity, Gerard feels like a relic from a time gone by, but somebody who was born and bred to fight and to be a true warrior. And so while the Miracle might not be as strong as the Visionary on paper, that plus Gerard's immense speed, his immense strength, and crucially his capacity for battle, his mental capacity to fight, that Gremmy completely lacks, makes him easily the most dangerous and the most powerful of them all. But if we were to compare Gerard briefly to some of his contemporaries, we've already done Gremmy, and really, now the Sternritter in general are very, 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 very powerful, but the disparity in power between the strongest Sternritter and the weakest is enormous. Like, it is an incredible gulf, the likes of which we've never, I would say, really seen. Like, I think the strongest captain and the weakest captain, while there is a considerable gap there, it's nothing like the Sternritter. I would say, personally, anyway. I don't remember who I actually said was the absolute weakest Sternritter, but it's probably going to be, you know, someone who's killed by Kenpachi in the first invasion. You would imagine that that Gerard appears like a god to them as well, despite being of supposedly the same faction. Really, even within the Sternritter itself, and if we think about the top 10 from my original video, maybe only the top 5 kind of come anywhere near close to each other. And I think if I remember off the top of my head, it was like Gerard, Leal, Gremmy, Pernida, Hashvolf. And, you know, those guys unsurprisingly make up the bulk of the Schutzstaffel. Askin is kind of there as well, but really you can see from his fight. And actually, this is a point I just want to make briefly, but something that I really did like was that Askin is killed like a normal person. Now, yes, he's incredibly tanky, and the death dealing gives him immunity, immortality to certain things, but unlike the other Schutzstaffel around him, unlike Gerard and Leal, who are supposed to come across as these angelic beings, Askin is killed once his heart is removed. Yes, he says a couple of little things, he still manages to talk for a little bit, but that's really just for dramatic effect. He's not getting back up at that point. If Gerard's heart was punched out of his chest by Grimjo, his whole body would just transform and he would return stronger than ever before. Numerous attempts are made on his life. At the very start of this fight, we see him, before he's even removed his helmet, Byakuya uses Senbon Zakura Kageyoshi when he realizes Gerard might be about to activate something. He smashes it into Gerard's head, and Kubo makes a point of showing us that Byakuya has basically gone through his skull in order to finish him off, because we see his helmet come flying off, and there's a hole in both the front and the back. And even Hinamori is like, did we really need to go that far? But of course, Gerard's the Miracle seems to be a passive ability that activates no matter what, and he transforms. Because he was killed, his entire body transforms. And he also seems to mention as well that he's never been quite so gravely wounded across the course of a battle, which is why he's so massive all of a sudden. So clearly it seems to also accumulate injury over time and convert it into this so-called god size. And then the second time he dies is when he gets cut in half, as we mentioned before, and the third time he dies is when all three captains come at him at once in a pretty awesome display. Hitsugaya, in his mature Bankai, freezes Gerard's body. Gerard, even talking like a god at this point, says, "I will not be fettered by the mere elements of this world." However, despite that, Kenpachi then injures his foot, sending Gerard crashing to the ground, and then Byakuya comes in for the final blow, using the true power of his Senkei ability to completely annihilate Gerard's head. And we see that he, loses everything from about here upwards, but then thanks to Hitsugaya freezing him to the bone, he just crumbles to nothing. And despite that, he comes back again. And so really, there's so few Sternritter even who can compare to this. Leal Barrow, in my opinion, is definitely the closest. And he even calls himself an emissary of God, like he is an angelic being. His transformations, the further into the fight, he transforms numerous times like Gerard as well. He seems to take on, I would say, a more biblical appearance, like he looks like an eldritch abomination, whereas Gerard, like I said, takes on more of that stereotypical warrior Viking vibe. Leal Barrow, I think, is a little bit different to Gerard, though. The X-axis is so strong, it makes him completely impervious to damage, and it's again, this idea of just something that's so insurmountable to defeat. And yet the reason why I still think Gerard is stronger than Leal is because it comes down to that regenerative capacity. We see that Leal Barrow has his powers scattered and his body is like cleaved in half, and technically, yes, he survives it. He splits up into these multiple weird, like, flamingo creatures. But the difference here is that Leal is greatly incapacitated by this, like losing his halo, losing essentially most of his powers. He is robbed of his abilities and kind of just dispersed across the land. We have no proof of this, and so really it's only speculative, but if somehow Gerard's own power were reflected back by the Shinken Hakkyoken, as it were, with Leal, I presume it would have a similar effect, as he has got similarly angelic godlike ability. But the difference is that I think even if Gerard's body were just like split apart and ripped apart, he would return anew again anyway, because he is supposed to be the beating heart of the Soul King. And again, that's where a difference between him and Leal lies. Gerard is actually a part of the true god of the Bleach universe, whereas Leal Barrow is not. Leal may have been the first Quincy to gain a shrift, but Gerard already had his powers innately. So being this idea of the beating heart of the Soul King means that Gerard is the embodiment of life and living itself. As long as he exists in a way, he will continue to return and continue to fight for his master. And we see that once he is cut in half by Kenpachi, we see a Quincy cross in the center of his being where his heart should be. It's actually a really weird sequence, and I kind of wish it had been explained a bit more, but like Gerard's blood seems to be like attached to this Quincy cross. It seems to like move around it, encircle it, and then he transforms again. So what I think that is supposed to be showing you is that Gerard's Quincy essence is literally his heart, his core is Quincy power at the end of the day. So he is basically unkillable until the only person on this earth robs him of that power, strips him bare, and it kills him. And I think, again, the idea you're supposed to see there is, with the Quincy power being his very core, it's almost like as long as Yuha Bark exists, so will Gerard. But because Yuha has the power to just rob Sternritters of their power, Gerard kind of goes along with it, because without it, he doesn't exist anymore. That's just a theory of mine. It's speculative because Kubo didn't actually go into that, but I think it makes a lot of sense. But basically what I'm trying to get at is Gerard is this unstoppable, literally undying, immortal soldier of God who wields his blade just to defend his king, his all-father, and their new realm. And so for me, Gerard is clearly the strongest enemy we've ever seen outside of the two main big bads. He is the ultimate kind of wall that the Gotei 13 must come up against, and he defeats countless characters. You know, all of the Vizard get taken out in a single hit, which is kind of nonsense, but it happens anyway. He, defeats Shinji. He defeats numerous captain-level characters. The three captains against him, Hitsugaya, Byakuya, and Kenpachi, use their absolute strongest forms in that huge battle royale, and he survives regardless. Truthfully, they would never have won that fight had it not been for Yuha Bark giving them a miracle, which again is, I think, what you're supposed to take away from that. But they would never have won. They literally give it their all to destroy his body, and he returns nonetheless. And even if you compare Gerard to other villains in the series, I think he comes out on top. And that's because I think the top tier of the Sternritter, who are supposed to come across as godly divine beings, are probably way more powerful than basically every villain we've ever seen. That includes all of the Espada, Gin, Tosen. I personally don't think any of them come close to this at the crop of the highest ranked Schutzstaffel members. I think they are definitely the strongest enemies outside of Aizen and Yuha Bark himself. But that's it for this video on how strong is Gerard Valkyrie, Sternritter M, the Miracle. I think he is literally the most powerful enemy we ever see in the series outside of Aizen and Yuha Bark, and acts as the ultimate endgame hurdle for the Gotei 13 to clash with. It's kind of funny, in many ways he does play a role that is exactly reflective of Yami Largo in the Arankar arc. You get close to the end of the arc, and to defend their home turf, one of the villains transforms into this titanic form that is absolutely massive and perhaps way more powerful than we first thought. The difference here is that Yami remains a total joke, while Gerard Valkyrie clearly walks the walk, clearly can put his money where his mouth is. And I actually did quite like that. Gerard is not my favourite character. He's not the most compelling. He's not even the most interesting Schutzstaffel, but I did like that he was able to put up a really good fight. But I want you guys to let me know in the comments below, is my interpretation of Gerard Valkyrie correct? Is he the strongest villain the series has ever seen outside of Aizen and Yuha Bark? And is he the strongest Sternritter? I'd love to know your thoughts. Do let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done already, and until next time, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.